serious topic today. Hello and welcome to What's with People with Doc Locke. I'm Dr. Stephanie Lockbuehler, social psychologist and obscenities apologist. Obscenities or obscenities? The goal of these videos is to give mini lessons on phenomena, theories, and topics in social psychology, which is the scientific study of the way that people think about, influence, and relate to others. Or, in other words, it's the science of why the fuck are people like that? Obscenities. This video is all about the question, what's with people talking about discrimination? I mean, I'm not racist or sexist or ageist, so this shit doesn't apply to me, right? Here's the thing, despite our best intentions, we all have biases that we're often not even aware of. It's a normal part of being human. The problem lies in how these biases can easily impact our behavior without us also being aware of it. And if we aren't aware of it because we're too busy trying to make ourselves feel better by denying their existence, then we can't make sure that our biases don't affect our actions towards other people. And as uncomfortable as it makes people feel to talk about or even think about this, I promise you, you will be surprised on how relevant it actually is. Let's get ready to get uncomfortable! Between 1989 and 2017, over 21 studies were conducted in which resumes were sent to various companies and industries and cities, and they were the exact same in content. The only difference was that the resumes either had a typically white-sounding name or they had a typically black-sounding name. And what they found between all of these studies is that, on average, white applicants received 36% more callbacks than the black applicants. They did this with male and female sounding names too, and what they found was the exact same thing, that male applicants received more callbacks than female applicants. In 2019, they found the same results across European and other North American countries, and it shows that discrimination in the hiring process exists in many other countries as well. But here's the thing, if you asked the hiring people if they were being racist or sexist or if they were purposefully discriminating, they would adamantly deny it. And not just because they didn't want to admit it, but it's because they weren't even aware that they were doing it at all. But what exactly is discrimination? It's defined as positive or negative behavior directed towards a social group and its members. So are you surprised that I said positive behavior in that definition too? Yeah, that's because we're often mostly concerned with negative behaviors against groups and people, but you should be aware that discrimination against one group ultimately means discrimination in favor of others. So for example, in the studies about discrimination in the hiring process, positive discrimination towards white or male applicants receiving more callbacks meant that there was negative discrimination against black or female applicants. Also, when we hear the word discrimination, what often comes to mind is what we call overt or open discrimination, such as slurs and threats and violence. You know, the shit that makes the news. However, while this kind of discrimination and hatred is pretty obvious, it can often blind us to more subtle discrimination that harms others in very real ways. And this kind of discrimination can happen even when we aren't aware of it, like ignoring or avoiding people from a minority group, or facial expressions and body language that communicates negative feelings towards a group. And as we saw in the previous studies, even decision-making can be influenced without our awareness. So what leads us to act in ways that discriminate against others? The underlying processes behind discrimination is prejudice. This is defined as positive or negative evaluations, or attitudes or feelings or reactions or emotions, of a social group and its members. Now, the key difference between prejudice and discrimination is that prejudice is the emotion or the evaluation that you kind of feel about a group, while discrimination is the behavior. A lot of people think they're the same thing, but they're not. Now, like discrimination, we're mostly concerned with the negative evaluations, but as we mentioned previously, even positive evaluations towards one group may lead to prejudice against another group. And also, like discrimination, when we hear the word prejudice, we often think of the people who will outright say how they feel about a group, their dislike or hatred towards a group. This is what we call explicit bias. If you ask someone how they feel about a group, what they are able to say is obviously conscious, it's controlled, they're aware of it. But science has found that we also have prejudice or bias that we might not even be aware of. And this is what's called implicit bias. To understand how this happens, we need to understand where bias or prejudice comes from, and that is stereotypes. A stereotype is a belief or an impression of a social group that people form by associating specific characteristics with the group. Or, in other words, it's an image of what social groups are like or what they do. If I were to say the word nerd, what comes to mind? Now, probably a whole lot of information from what they look like, what they do, what they like to do. This is an example of a stereotype. Now, stereotypes can be accurate or they can be inaccurate. An example of an accurate stereotype might be an introvert. If I were to say that introverts don't like to be the center of attention, this would be an accurate stereotype because introverts describe themselves that way and other introverts share that same sentiment and feeling about their group. Don't look at me. However, stereotypes can often be inaccurate as well. The stereotype that women are less capable than men in leadership positions. It not only assumes that every woman is the same, but research has also found that there's no differences in leadership abilities between men and women. So statistical evidence doesn't support this belief, making it inaccurate. Here's a stereotype: white people don't have rhythm. It just so happens that I don't. Stereotypes can be positive or negative. However, it's important to note that even positive stereotypes can have negative consequences because it generalizes or it assumes that all people are the same, and it can often create unrealistic or unreasonably high standards. So, for example, there is a stereotype among white American college students that Asian American students are all straight A students. The problem with this is that, one, it assumes that all Asian American students are the same, even though, like all students, there are going to be differences in academic abilities. So there will be Asian American students who get grades that are lower than an A. However, this stereotype also puts extra pressure on those students to do better than their abilities might actually allow, or it might cause them to be judged more harshly for receiving average grades. It's important for us to know more about stereotypes because once a stereotype exists, it influences how people think, how they feel, and how they act towards members of stereotyped groups. So let's see how the process of discrimination happens based on what you've already learned. It starts with a stereotype, like blondes are dumb. Oh my god, like that's not true. This can lead to an emotion or prejudice, such as a distrust of a blonde woman's academic credibility, which can then lead to discrimination or the action of dismissing or questioning the woman's academic background just because she has blonde hair, okay? I'm not your typical professor. I'm like a cool professor. This is the part where people start saying, nah, this doesn't apply to me. I don't have prejudice at all. I'm a good person. But here's the thing, everyone has stereotypes and everyone has biases. It's natural and it's normal to have stereotypes and biases. And most of the time, we're not even aware of it. It doesn't make you a bad person to have stereotypes and biases. It's what you do with them that matters. So it's even more important that we become aware of them so that we can put in the work to make sure that they don't impact our behavior. Why the fuck do we stereotype? We do it to understand and predict our world easily and quickly. For example, if I drive to Target because I need to get something quickly. Let's be honest, no trip to Target is ever quick. But I don't know where the item is located. I might run into the store and approach someone wearing a red shirt and khakis and a name tag to ask them for their help. And it's because of the stereotype in my mind about what a Target employee looks like and what a Target employee does that makes my shopping trip much easier and quicker, rather than if I went around asking anyone and everyone in the store if they're a Target employee, which would actually be hilarious to watch. So stereotypes are mental shortcuts, and they can help us to know when to approach someone, like the target employee, or when to avoid. For example, if I'm in the park and I see an insect with yellow and black stripes and a stinger on its ass flying towards me, I know to avoid that bug because it might fucking hurt me. The response of fear and running away that I have is immediate. I didn't have to think about the qualities of the bug and start to compare that bug to the other bugs in order to know how to feel or what to do. My mind was helping me out to know to stay the fuck away so that I wouldn't get hurt. Fuck. Now, if I see a bug that's red with black spots on its back and it's flying towards me, I immediately know that it's a ladybug, and I may feel excited and try to approach it and try to catch it in my hands because I know that it's not going to hurt me. Ladybug. Again, the response is immediate. I didn't have to think about it at all. This is an example of how stereotypes help us to know quickly and easily how to respond to things in our environment. And it's also an example of how stereotypes can lead to automatic or habit-like behaviors without our awareness. We also stereotype to connect with people that are similar to us. As humans, we need to feel connected. We need to belong. We need to feel accepted. So we are programmed to seek out people that are similar to us. Now, back in our caveman days, it was a protective strategy to be wary of people who were different, because they could potentially harm us. However, in our modern world, we are often around people that are different from us, but our brains haven't really caught up to the changes just yet. Come on, brains, catch up! So while stereotypes can obviously help us make the world less complicated, sometimes they exaggerate the similarities and differences that are between us and different groups, which can cause us to think and behave in ways that are harmful and incorrect. For example, bumblebees are also yellow and black striped bugs, but they're not aggressive, and they're actually really friendly with humans, and they're incredibly important to the pollination of crops. They look like little flying pandas. Now, if I see a bumblebee flying towards me, my instinct might be to see the yellow stripes and stinger and try to swat at or hurt the bee to protect myself, but I need to take a minute to recognize my irrational fear and to prevent myself from hurting the bee unnecessarily. You see where I'm going, right? Now, if we all have stereotypes to help us navigate our world, how do we learn these stereotypes in the first place? We learn from others and from our environment, especially as children. I blame the parents! The way we learn stereotypes is often without our awareness and over a long period of time. And this can either be done directly. For example, you might have heard a close family member say things about other groups when you were growing up. Maybe you had a parent that would say things like, I would never vote for a woman to be president. They don't have leadership abilities because of their periods. Or that people of a certain race were not to be trusted, or that people of certain groups were bad in some way. We can also learn indirectly. For example, if as a child your parent locked the door every time they drove through a neighborhood that mostly had minorities living there, you may have concluded that there must be something wrong or dangerous or untrusting about that group. We may also indirectly learn stereotypes by looking at the common roles and occupations that people hold. If we see women in primarily caregiving roles like nurses or teachers, and we see white men in leadership roles, then we might unconsciously learn stereotypes based on this information. We can also learn from social norms, which are generally accepted ways of thinking, feeling, and acting. And this includes the idea that women's role in society is to be in charge of the household duties. These norms are often shown in the media as well, which is another very influential way that we learn stereotypes. I blame the media! Now, growing up, when we see commercials for laundry detergent and cooking that were primarily starring women and geared towards that demographic, we learn that stereotype without even being aware of it. Other stereotypes that are promoted through media throughout the years include Muslims being shown as terrorists, or women in supporting roles for male stars, or less intelligent and in need of saving, or elderly people being shown as senile and also less intelligent, or overweight people being made fun of or said to be less attractive. So what are some ways that we can find out about our implicit biases? The first step is to do some self-reflection. It's important to take inventory of your beliefs, how you've learned them over the years, how they might affect your actions, because without being aware of them, you can't make a conscious effort to change them. You can also take the Implicit Associations Test, or the IAT. It's a scientific assessment that was developed in 1998, and it's still very widely used to identify implicit biases. Now, Harvard has a link to a number of implicit association tests to identify biases regarding race and gender and age and religion and sexual identity or orientation, even body type. It is highly encouraged that you try it out. Do it! Now, if you've taken the test, you may be surprised by your results. This is normal. Most people don't think that they have any preferences of one group over another, but research has found, for example, with white people, they tend to have strong implicit preferences towards their own group as a result of stereotypes that were learned over time. In fact, research also finds that minorities and women often hold the same biases that white people and men have against them because they've also learned the same stereotypes over time. Now, this can be upsetting, and it can also be upsetting just to find out that you have biases that you didn't know you had. And some people feel guilt or shame, or they feel like they're not a good person. It's important to take a moment to kind of reflect on those feelings or emotions that you're having, and especially any resistance that you may be feeling as well. Again, it's really normal to feel those feelings, but it's important to remember that awareness is the first step. And without awareness, we can't make sure that they aren't affecting our behavior. Stereotype and prejudice research is a huge topic in social psychology. Huge! So stay tuned. Next week, we will be discussing how do the different types of biases affect our behavior? Under what circumstances are they more likely to impact our behavior? And most importantly, how can we overcome their impact on our behavior? And congrats for making it through this and educating yourself on such an important topic. It's not always comfortable to find out these things about yourself, but it's definitely necessary. Good job. I'm so proud of you! So, thank you. I'll see you next time. Hi! Welcome! Hey, ladybug, ladybug, give me a kiss. Good job, good job, good job.